Data binding is the relationship between component and the property. Sorry, template. So there is some relation between component and template. The relationship between the component and the template is called as data binding. In the component, we will have a property. In the template, we have a HTML tag. Exactly between the HTML tag of the template and property of the component, we will establish the relationship. That relationship is called as data binding. And we have four types of data bindings: property binding, event binding, two-way binding, and interpolation binding. Okay, four types of bindings are provided, that is property binding, event binding, two-way binding, interpolation binding. Four types of bindings allowed. We are able to create four types of bindings. What are they? Property binding, event binding, two-way binding, and interpolation binding. Four types of bindings are possible. Now let us try to understand property binding. When we have to use the property binding, whenever you want to assign a value into the attribute of the particular tag, we have to use property binding. Okay, use property binding when you want to assign the value of a property into an attribute of a tag. Then we have to use property binding. So at one side we have a property, at other side we have an attribute. You want to read the value from the property and assign the same into attribute. To assign the value of a property into the attribute, we have to use property binding. And here, every time when the property value has been changed, automatically the attribute value will be changed. Every time when we modify the value of the property, the attribute value will be changed. So whenever we just modify the value of the property, automatically attribute value will be changed. Now check it. So we have basically two things, component and a template. We have a relation between the component and a template. So component is basically a class. Inside the component, we have a property, some data type, some value we can specify. So this value I want to assign into a attribute of the particular tag. So in the template we have, template is nothing but what? HTML file. In the HTML file we have a tag. And the tag is having some attribute. Inside the attribute, we have to assign the value of the particular property. You want to read the value from the property and assign the same into attribute. For this case, we have to use property binding. So in order to assign the value of this property to this one, first we have to keep that particular attribute into the square brackets. Square bracket is symbol of property binding. Here we have to give the name of the property. So which property value you want to read that property name here? Into which attribute you want to assign, that attribute should be in the square brackets. Property name should be in the double quotes. Attribute name should be in the square brackets. So it will read the value from the property and assign the same into attribute. Not only that, every time when you modify the property value, the same will be automatically updated in the corresponding attribute. So always the direction of flow of data is one way. That is, the value of property will be assigned into attribute. Anytime when we modify the property value, automatically the same value getting updated in the attribute. But in case if you modify the value of attribute, the same will not be updated in the property, remember. Only it is from component to template, not from template to component. That is one way binding. Okay, I will show this in the example. Do you remember in the previous lessons we have created a application, login application we have created. Okay, let's check it. Where we have created several applications. Let me check once. Where we have given login example. Yeah, this one. App 3. App 3 I'm trying to open. Login example. Okay, which we have already done. And let me execute this. CD is equivalent Angular 8 PM. CD app 3. ng serve we have to give. We must give ng serve only inside the corresponding location where your application name is present. Our application name is app 3, so first we must locate to app 3, then only we have to give ng serve command. And after successful compilation, we have to give localhost 4200. Okay, in this example, just have a look at once. Are we using anywhere property binding? Here in this code, are we using any property binding anywhere? Yes. Where we are using property binding? No. No. In the ng model, we are not using property binding. Here, this one. This one, style.color is nothing but example of property binding. Here, style is an attribute. Okay, style is an attribute. So, style may be any attribute. Style in HTML, we have different attributes like for attribute, ID attribute, name attribute, value attribute. For different HTML tags, we have different attributes in HTML. So, in place of style, we can use any other attribute. In place of style.color, we can use any other suitable attribute, whichever as per the particular tag. So in this place, we can use an attribute, but we are keeping that attribute name inside the square brackets, right? So once we keep the square brackets, automatically it becomes a binding. See, if you don't give these brackets, it is not a binding at all. It is not at all called as a binding. But once we have added the square brackets, automatically it is a binding. That what type of binding? It is a property binding. Because it will read the value from the message color property and assign the same into style.color attribute. Anytime when you modify the style.color message color attribute value. For example, when we modify the message color equal to green or red, automatically the same value will be updated into the corresponding attribute which is mentioned here. So it will always read the value from the property and assign the same into corresponding attribute. It is one way, that is property to attribute. That is indirectly component to template, because the attribute belongs to HTML tag. HTML tag present inside the template. So indirectly attribute is a part of the template. Property is declared in the component. So overall the direction is from component to template. The same is explained here. Always direction is component to template. This is property binding. Okay, the second type of binding is event binding. Okay, when we have to use event binding, use event binding when you want to handle the events. When you want to register events, any JavaScript events, click event, double click event, okay, focus event, blur event, any other events. So any kind of events can be handled by using what? Event binding. Okay, any kind of events can be handled by event binding. So in order to do so, just we have to create a class. So for example, I want executive function when the user clicks on the button, or when the user double clicks, or when the user places mouse pointer on that. Some respective event will be there. So first I must create a method here. Method name, bracket opening, bracket close. Here some code can be there. This is one way of writing the method. Or we can also write in another alternative way, that is method name equal to, then round brackets equal to greater than this one. Okay, so this is the actual standard syntax, but the second one is recommended syntax. The second one is also called as arrow function, which is newly introduced in ECMAScript 6. If you want to follow the ECMAScript 6 standards, it is recommended to follow the arrow functions. Otherwise, you can follow the regular method name, that is old syntax. So presently, either of these we can use. Old syntax is first one, newly recommended syntax is second one. So with any one of these syntaxes, we have to create a method, and this is totally the component. Okay, inside the component we have a method, and in the template, that means in the HTML file, we will have a tag, and for this tag you want to register some event name, maybe click event or double click and whatever. So here we have to give the method name. Whichever the method you have created here, that method name we have to provide. Here round brackets is symbol of event binding, square bracket is symbol of property binding, round bracket is symbol of event binding. And in our example, have we used the event binding anywhere? Yes, we have used event binding, where click is an example of event binding. Okay, in place of click, we can also use any other events like any other, like a DBL click or focus or mouse over, any JavaScript event we can use. Okay, next one. Third type of binding is two-way binding. Okay, third type of binding is two-way binding. What is two-way binding? Two-way binding is equal to property binding plus event binding. Property binding plus event binding. And before than that, the direction from the direction of the event binding is every time whenever this event is executed, automatically we are calling the function, right? I mean method, right? So this event will call the method. Every time when we click, we are calling a method. Okay. Every time some event is occur, like click or something here, then automatically we are calling a corresponding method. So the direction is from template to component. But previously it was component to template. Previously it was like every time when you modify the property value, the modification of the property value directly updated in the corresponding attribute. That's why the direction is from property to attribute, that is from component to template previously. Now the every time the event is raised in the template, the same will be updated in the corresponding component method. So this the direction is from template to component. But two-way binding is both forward plus backward. That is component to template plus template to component, vice versa. So here the point of two-way binding is when the value of property is changed, when the value of property changed, the value of HTML tag will be changed. Same like this, when the value of HTML tag is changed, the value of property will be changed automatically. So vice versa. Property changed means HTML tag is changed. HTML tag is changed means property also will be changed. So how to implement this? First, in the component, we will have a property. Some property is there, some data type, some value, and this particular value you want to display in the corresponding output. So what will you do here? Some template you will take. Here only for input tag and select tag, this two-way binding is applicable, not for any other HTML tags. Only for input tag and select tag. Because in this input tag and select tag only there is a possibility of user entering or user selection, right? Suppose in the heading or paragraph, can the user type some text? No. Only in input tag and select tag, there is a possibility of user value entry. That's why only for input tag we can give two-way binding. Only for input and select tag. So input, we have to use a combination of property binding plus event binding. What is the symbol of property binding? Square brackets, right? This one, square brackets. What is the symbol of event binding? Round brackets. So outer level property binding, that is square brackets, inner level round brackets, that is a event binding. So property binding plus event binding at a time. Now ng model is a predefined directive to create two-way binding. This word is taken from AngularJS 1. In AngularJS, there was a directive, predefined directive called ng-model. Just like that, here also there is a predefined directive called ng-model, which is needed to create a two-way binding. So ng model is equal to, here we have to give name of the property. I mean this property name here. So automatically this property value gets updated in the corresponding text box, and vice versa. So anytime initially what happens is this property value gets updated in the corresponding text box, and reverse also, both forward plus backward, component to template, template to component. Next, fourth one, interpolation binding. Okay, next fourth one, interpolation binding. When we have to use interpolation binding, use interpolation binding to display output, to display value of the property to the user, or you can say in the web page. So in the web page, when you want to display the value of the property, we have to use interpolation binding. Okay, we have a property and we want to display its value in the web page, then we have to use interpolation binding. And anytime, every time when we modify the value of property, the same will be automatically displayed in the web page. Suppose we have a property called x equal to 10. Presently 10 is in the output. Suppose later x equal to 15, 15 will be displayed automatically in the output. We did not write separate program to update the output. Automatically output will be updated. Again later we make x equal to 100, again output will be 100. So the output will be reflected automatically in any time when you modify the value of the corresponding property. So for this interpolation binding, so first we should have a component, and we should have a property also. Some value also required. I want to display this value in the output. So what we'll do in the template, we are going to use double curly braces. In the double curly braces, we have to give actual name of the property. So in this place, we are going to display the actual property, actual value of the property. Anytime when you modify the property value, the same gets updated in the corresponding template. So in our login example, all types of properties already we have used. No need of looking for other example. Same example itself is demonstrating all types of properties. Check it. See, when you modify the text box value, same is updating in the username property here. And if you modify the value of username property in the program, the same will be updated in the text box, vice versa. Okay, that is two-way binding. When we click on the button, it is going to call the method, right? So that is the event binding. And based on the entry, it is displaying either red color or green color in the style.color attribute, right? So we are assigning the value of the message color property into style.color, right? So it is an example of property binding. And in this place, actual message will be appear, right? Either successful login or invalid login. So here, this is an example of interpolation binding. Okay, all types of bindings already we have used in the same example itself. Okay, these are the types of data bindings in Angular. But remember, this ng model will work only when you are importing forms module. When you import the forms module, then only the two-way binding works. This forms module is a predefined module which is providing the built-in directives to create two-way binding. Built-in directive to create two-way binding means ng model. This ng model predefined definition should be there somewhere. See, we are using a predefined function. For example, in C language, printf function is there. Printf is a function coming from some header file stdio.h, just like that. ng model predefined definition is coming from which package, which module? Forms module. Forms module comes from which package? Angular/forms package. That's why if you want to use ng model, compulsory we have to make sure we have imported already forms module. Okay, that's the reason. Otherwise, we'll get error. But if you don't want to really use the ng model, at the time forms module is not required, because other types of bindings work without forms module also. Only for ng model, that means only for two-way binding only, forms module is really required. Okay, these are the different types of bindings. Okay, so I'm just creating a new application to demonstrate newly. So just I'm opening these files. Okay, in the app.module.ts, import forms module from Angular/forms. Then go to app.component.ts. No, here we forgot, here below also we should add. Okay, we have to import forms module into the current working file, and also we have to import the forms module after the browser module. Okay, so after that, so here coming to the actual coding, here we are going to declare a property called x equal to 10. X is a number data type, it's a 10, and I'm going to display the value of x. X is, we are displaying the value x. So what is the output you can expect in the output? In this place, the actual value 10 will be displayed in this place. Okay, here we have given 10, right? So 10 will be displayed. Okay, now as of now output is x is 10, but I want to assign the value of x into some particular attribute. For example, I want to assign into max length attribute of the text box. Max length attribute, max length attribute. So we have to keep square brackets, right? Square brackets is equal to the X. That means it will read the value of the X property and assign the same into max length attribute. So overall max length equal to 10. That means we are allowing only 10 characters in the text box. Next, I want to display the value 10 in the text box. Then what to do? We require to assign the two-way binding. So when we modify the text box value, automatically the X property gets updated, plus X value automatically displayed in the text box. Reading plus writing both. Next, event binding also. So event binding only requires a method. For example, we have a button. Okay, we can create the buttons by using button tag also. When the user clicks on this button, we are going to call on OK button, for example. On OK, click. So in this method, we can write any code, whatever you like. Okay, so in this example, we have used all types of bindings. Check it again. First, we have used interpolation binding through double curly braces. This is property binding. We are assigning the value of the X into max length attribute. And this is ng model. Ng model is nothing but two-way binding. But remember, ng model is applicable only for input tag and select tag. In other HTML tags, ng model is not applicable because there is no possibility, there is no meaning. Only there is a meaning for there is a possibility for input tag and select tag. And for any HTML tag, we can use event. Not only don't think like only for buttons. We can use for any HTML tag event binding. Event binding like click event, double click event, focus event, blur event. These events are applicable for any HTML tag, not only for buttons. But it requires a method. In that method, we can write any code, whatever you like. Okay. Now let's execute this application. So we have to give cd app6 ng serve. We have to go ng serve. One minute. Is not assigning. So presently, if you can check in this example, I'm just typing something in the text box. See, this value is being updated in the immediately in this place. Why it is updating immediately? This value is immediately updating into which property? X property, right? X property automatically reflecting in the interpolation binding. So for these automatic updations, we are not writing any code. The user is naturally typing some value in the text box. Automatically, this latest value is, for example, 700 is immediately updating in the X property. Again, the X property is automatically updating in the interpolation binding in this place. So that's why here in the respective place, output is coming immediately without writing any special code for this. It all happens naturally in Angular. And in the button click programmatically, we can update it, right? For example, this dot x equal to this dot x plus 10. I mean, we have incremented it. Now check it. By default, it's already 10. If we click on the button, what happened? We have programmatically incremented by 10. So 10 plus 10, 10 becomes 20. The 20 is being updated in the both text boxes and in the interpolation binding also in both places. Because text box value is what? Two-way binding. Two-way binding principle is it will take the latest value of the property. Interpolation binding principle also same. It will take the latest value of the property always. So that's why the moment once we have updated the property only one time, only in a single statement, immediately in both places it gets reflected. Not only in the two places, if you repeat the same hundreds of times like this, in all the places, see in all the places it is getting reflected. How many times we have printed that X, how many times we have used X in different types of bindings, in all the places it gets reflected. Next, let me add this. Okay, let me add the property binding. For example, we have image path. Tick1.gif. Okay, we have just an image tick1.jpg. Basically, we have two images. We have two images. Tick1.jpg. Okay, this is the tick1.jpg and this is tick2.jpg. So both the tick1 and tick2, both of these I'm just copying and pasting into current working folder, that is in the src folder, assets folder available, right? In the assets folder, we have to copy paste the images. Remember, the correct place for placing the images is assets folder only. In the src assets folder, what is the file name? tick1.jpg and tick2.jpg. So in the assets folder, we have to place tick1.jpg initially. I want to assign this image path in the img tag. So img, I'm using square brackets, src equal to the property name. What is the property name? Image path is a property name. So the first image appear, you can notice there. But suppose our requirement is when the user places mouse pointer on that, it has to display the second image. So on mouse over, which event we are going to use? Mouse over event. On mouse over, we are going to call on image mouse over method. It is not a predefined method, we have to create it. In this place, what are we doing? image path equal to assets/tick2.jpg. Initially what image appear tick1 only. On placing the mouse pointer on that, it becomes tick2.jpg. Dynamically it is changing or not? That is because of property binding only. And when we come back, what we expect? Again it should go back to tick1, right? So again for that we should write one more event, that is mouse out event on image mouse out. So in this method we are going to write tick1.jpg. That's all. So overall, on placing the mouse pointer on the tick2, on coming back tick1, like this interchangeably the images are changing. So immediately when we have assigned the value into image path property, automatically the value of image path property is being updated into which property, which attribute? Assets attribute. How it is updating? It is updating through the property binding. And of course, for mouse over, mouse out, for any other JavaScript events, we have to use event binding. Okay, so this is the other demonstration on data bindings.